Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. Today's guest is John R. Miles, the founder of the Passion Struck movement, which now reaches over 75 million people worldwide. But before this, he had what looked like a perfect resume: a U.S. Navy officer and a Fortune 50 executive leading high-performing teams. But he's here because he recognized a profound failure in that traditional picture of success. He saw that despite the accolades, people everywhere, including himself, were struggling with a quiet crisis of meaning and belonging. He walked away from the corporate world to solve that problem. He's the author of Passion Struck, and he's here to talk about the courage it takes to leave a secure path and build a life that truly matters. So, John, it's a true honor to have you on the podcast today. Welcome, sir.
Ezekiel, it's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's dive in, sir. So, your transition is fascinating from the structure of the Navy and the C-suite to leading a global movement on mattering. So, you mentioned that this shift came from realizing that despite outward success, people were facing a quiet crisis of lost meaning. So, can you take us back to the moment you personally felt that crisis?
Yes, and first off, I wanted to say that I think that this is the most pervasive issue of our time. We hear many people who talk about the loneliness epidemic, people feeling hopeless, helpless, burned out, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it. But as I've talked to more people throughout the world, in fact, I was talking to a group of people from India today, the words that people keep telling me is they feel unseen, unheard, unappreciated. In other words, they're feeling more and more invisible in their own life. And I think with the world that we're in now, this is becoming more pervasive than it ever has in our history. And I believe that there are times and inflection points that we go through, such as the printing press, such as industrialization, where a phenomenon hits the world in such a way that it causes a huge ripple. And I think that's exactly what the digital world now, artificial intelligence and everything else is doing to us. Certainly what it did to me, because I believe across the world we've been living a lie for the past 50 or 60 years on how we've been brought up, on what brings fulfillment, what is going to make us feel like we are living the life that we've always been dreamed of. And we get into this mechanism where we're conditioned to perform instead of to feel, to execute instead of self introspect, to operationalize instead of connecting with one another. And that's certainly what happened to me. I am the type who, when I have a goal, I am all in on figuring out how to achieve it, and I go after it relentlessly. So my goal early on when I left the military was to someday become the CEO of a large company.
Mm.
And I looked at ruthlessly, how do you go about doing that? And what are the steps I needed to do in order to do it? In my case, my background came in technology. I understood that if I were going to achieve that, I needed to hone in on my technology background, but I also needed to understand operations, marketing, HR, and other disciplines. So I started to shape my career in that way. And when I found myself in the C-suite of a Fortune 50 company, in what I had dreamed 20 years before I reached there as being the pinnacle of my career, I found myself as if I was staring at the abyss, looking at a life that felt rewarding on the outside, but completely hollow on the inside. I felt like I had poured so much into achieving what I thought was going to bring me fulfillment when I missed the core things that truly make life meaningful.
All right. So, John, when you decided to walk away from that Fortune 50 career, what was the biggest internal resistance or fear you had to overcome? So, did you feel like, you were failing by leaving such a coveted position?
Well, I don't think any of us make a change overnight. So I believe that I had been feeling a God given calling to do something different for a while. Um, I, I, I feel we are all put on earth here by our Creator to use the inherent gifts that we each are given that are unique to us to do something meaningful, to solve a problem that we see across the world in a way that only we can do it with our God-given talents. And uh, I had been given this vision that I was supposed to help the beaten, the broken, the bored, the battered, the helpless, the lonely of the world find themselves. But I don't know about you, but when you're given a mission like that, maybe like Moses was given by God, I don't think overnight you exactly know what to do with it or how to approach it. Who are the people you're even supposed to be called to serve or any of it? So at first, it's quite terrifying when you hear something as crystal clear as I did that I was using my God given talents in pursuit of the wrong things that I was put on earth to do. So I think the first thing you've got to do is you've got to take a huge leap back and get back to your core. And I think what stops us from doing that is so much gets in the way. The things that get in the way a lot of the time are money, our social status, our professional status, and the visionary arsonist that's in all of us, which is that brain bully that is telling you to leave the path that you're on is going to be excruciatingly difficult. Why do it when you've got this glide path that you're currently living? So I think that's the chasm that we have to cross. It's as if you're standing on Everest looking at another Everest 100 miles away and you're told to cross from one to the other, but you don't see a bridge or anything else, just air. And you sit there wondering, how on earth am I going to be able to go from point A to point B? And I think that's where 99.9% of us get stuck.
All right. So, John, you talk about the mattering crisis. So, how do you see setbacks or failures contribute to that feeling of not mattering for people today?
Well, I think it's much bigger than this. It's a much bigger question than what you're asking. I think people I just saw yesterday that Netflix, a major corporation here in the United States, cut
Mm-hmm.
almost 14,000 employees, which is it was over 10% of their workforce. And I'm hearing more companies are going to be doing the same thing. I have a son who's 27, another daughter who's 21, who are both trying to figure out how do you become irreplaceable in a world that seems to want to replace everything that makes us human.
Mm.
And I think that's at the core of what mattering is when everything feels like it can replace you, how do you add value? And I think that's the mattering gap that so many people are feeling. So I don't think it's just setbacks. I think it's a much more macro issue that people are feeling that they're extremely worried about how are they going to make money? How are they going to afford a house? How are they going to afford their rent when it seems like the jobs, especially for people starting out their career, the entry level jobs that so many people had are going away and new college graduates are finding it increasingly difficult to find work. So I think history has a way of repeating itself. And I think we've gone through the past 60, 70 years where a lot of people have abandoned much of the entrepreneurial ways that our forefathers went into, the small businesses, that made so much of the world tick as we've joined these large macro companies. And I think our roots, if you look back upon it, is we were tradespeople, we were farmers, we were blacksmiths. We had very specific trades that we had learned. And I think what people are going to find themselves doing is more and more people are going to become solopreneurs. But I think their skill sets will be more digitally focused. But I think we're seeing a mass exodus of the people who have worked long times at companies, and we're going to see a huge rise in freelancers and people having to hone their skills just like a blacksmith did, but in the modern economy. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. So, can you tell us about your book, Passion Struck? So, what's it about, and what was the motivation behind you writing that book? And also, who do you think should read the book? Who is the ideal reader you had in mind while writing it?
So I was at a period of probably the largest self-examination in my life. Had just gone through walking into my home and walking into a burglary of my house as it was underway and coming face to face with an intruder about 15 feet away from me, pointing a weapon directly at me. And after successfully evading that burglar, my best friend committed suicide a week later. And so, looking at my friend's life and looking at my own life, I was sitting and wondering, what am I waiting for? What is it going to take me to make this change that I know I need to make? Uh, and so, Passion Struck was really in one way, my self discovery, my me search of how did I do my own reinvention. So, that's part of it. The second part of it is I wanted to really study those who have had breakthrough lives that I consider people who are passion struck. And how do they do it? Is there a common pattern that I found across all of them? And I ended up studying about 700 different vanguards across different areas and found that there was, in fact, a common path, which is what I write about in the book that I experimented on myself for 2 years. And then, third, I wanted to give something to my kids and to their generation that if you were just starting your life and you wanted a playbook for how do you create not the life you should be leading, but what self efficacy calls the life you could be leading, how do you cross that gap? And how do you build it that way from scratch? So the book is really for people who are trying to reinvent their lives, people who are starting their careers and or their just life and looking for how to create a meaningful life, or they're looking to upskill their life and to learn from others who are vanguards of different fields, whether you're an actor, a musician, a Fortune 500 company, or an admiral, a general, or an astronaut, and how they did it.
All right. So, you've interviewed hundreds of high achievers. Is there a common thread in how the most passion-struck people handle their darkest moments compared to those who stay stuck?
Yeah, there's a huge thing. They welcome the darkest moments. They prepare for the darkest moments. They're intentional. They have been so intentional about how they've crafted their life, and they have ensured that they have a strong value system in place, a value system that really tracks to who they are at their core, what's important to them, and how that connects to their short term ambitions and long term aspirations so that when those dark moments happen, they have the scaffolding already in place to overcome it and to be able to climb out of it because they've built the foundation through the choices that they're making on an everyday basis to get out of those dark spots that are going to happen to every single one of us. So they're preparing before it ever even happens.
So, for the listener right now who feels stuck or burned out, successful on the outside but empty on the inside, What is the first small step you would challenge them to take today to start living more intentionally?
Well, what I read about in the book is that you first have to be a mission angler. I'm not sure if fishing is a big thing where you're from, but where I live, we have a lot of people who fish because I live pretty close to the ocean. If you're a person who's going to go out and fish and you're going to go take a boat out, do you think a person who's an angler just wakes up on a Saturday, says, I'm going to go fish? I have no idea where I'm going to go. So I'm going to just get in my boat, drive 20 miles out, put the boat down, put the fishing rod in the ocean, and hope I'm going to catch something. Do you think they're going to catch many fish doing that? Probably not. The
Yeah.
people I know are very strategic about it. They're looking at tides. They're looking at what fish are in season. Where have those fish been spotted? What time do we need to get out because of the tides? When have the fish been biting the most? How do I need to plan my day? What contingencies might I have? What's weather going to look like? Yet, how many of us live our lives like that? And so, where it all starts is you have to figure out and be honest with yourself about where your life is now and do an honest self assessment about uh, are you living to the value system that you say you want in your life? And what is that going to look like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if you continue down the path that you're going? Then you need to picture in your mind what is the life that you want to lead, that you could lead if you were intentional about it. And then you need to pick one area um, that you feel the most stuck about. And that needs to be the first thing you need to work on. In my case, I had a bunch of trauma that was combat related that I hadn't really processed, that was hindering me from confronting it and causing other stuck points in my life. So I had to face that trauma from combat and I had to deal with it. And by dealing with it, that allowed me to gain that momentum that I needed to gain the confidence that if I can tackle this, I can tackle anything in my life. But you need a starting point and then you just need to start and not overanalyze because once you get into it, things are going to evolve.
All right. A great response there. So, this has been such a profound conversation. So, John, for our listeners who want to join the Mattering Revolution, read Passion Stroke, or get your new children's book, so where is the best place for them to go?
So I would direct them to three different places. If you want to get more involved with my everyday writing, my Substack is theignitedlife.net. If you want to learn about what we're building with Passion Struck and everything that we're creating there, including the mattering verse ecosystem that we're building, you can go to passionstruck.com. And if you want to pick up my new children's book, it's at youmatterluma.com. And that's a picture book for kids 4 to 8 years old that teaches all kids that they are seen, that they have an important story to tell, and that their ripples of kindness that they can generate can go throughout the world and change millions of lives.
All right, John, it was a really insightful and profound conversation with you, and I'm indeed honored to have you on the podcast today. Thank you very much for showing up.
Thank you, Ezekiel.